Okay. And I think we're fine. No. Just another second. Yeah, here we go. We are live.
Yeah.
So, welcome everyone. We are doing the Octafinals BookTube Prize talks today, and with me are 5 of the judges from round 1, and I'm going to be asking every one of you to introduce yourself quickly. So maybe Debbie, you could start.
Hi, my name's Debbie Johnson. I don't have a BookTube channel, but I love to read, and I just been following all the channels. I really like My Reading Life with Heidi, and that's kind of got me into this.
Great, thank you. And Gemma?
Hi, I'm Gemma. I have a BookTube channel called Read a Book Gem, and for the first round, I was judging Group A in the fiction category.
Great. Chrissy?
Hi, I'm Christy. I have a BookTube channel called Kia Comments, and for the first group, I was judging book Group B.
Cool, thank you. And Lindsay, maybe you could go on.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. My channel name is Lindsay's Book Life, and I also judged Fiction Group B.
Okay, 2 of Group B, very good. And Sarah?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Wallace. I am a reader in Seattle, Washington. I do not have a channel, and I was a judge for Group D. D as in dog.
Group D, very good.
And I was a judge for Fiction Book Group A.
Group A,
Group
okay.
A too.
Okay, that's great. My name's Charlie. I have a very, very new BookTube channel, and I judged in Group F. Yes, okay, very good. So everybody who's watching, if you want to communicate with us in the comments, that's great. We'll be able to pick up your comments. So if you have any questions or any remarks that we could include, so feel free to just leave us comments in the live chat at the side. And yeah, we'll be talking a little bit about the judges' experience with their books, with their group, with their reading over the 2 months, and then later on move to the books that were judged, and we'll see how that goes. So to start us off, did you judge for the first time? Were any of you judging for the last round, for the first round, or are you newbies to the prize? Maybe you could let us know.
I'm a newbie.
Me too.
And so am I.
I judged last year all the rounds, so.
Oh,
All the rounds. Okay. Yeah, I knew that you were judging, but I didn't know you did all.
I can't resist.
this is my first time judging as well.
Okay, yeah, well, that's cool. It's my first time as well, so mainly newbies, and Lindsay can share a bit of her experience comparing that to the last year's BookTube prize. So did any of you did you have a system? Did you have a strategy while judging? How did you rank the books? How did you go?
I ranked mine as I went. So after I finished one, I sort of ranked it, and then the next one I read, I ranked it again. I think if I waited till the end, I wouldn't have remembered bits from the ones that I'd read before. So I just found it easier while it was fresh in my mind to just rank it as I went along the way.
I use a system called Cawpile, Cawpile, and it breaks it down by character and atmosphere and intrigue and entertainment. So I judged it all subjectively and objectively as well, and it worked really well for me. And then I wrote it all down in my reading journals, all my thoughts as I went, and then I was able to rate them as I went.
I definitely feel like I did it all wrong. I waited till the very end. I think for my group, I had read 3 of the books previously. So, I waited to the end, and then I was trying to rank books that I had just read with books that I had maybe read 6 months ago, and that makes it a little challenging.
I see.
Yeah,
So
oh, go ahead, Christy.
so I judge books pretty much the same, but it's definitely subjective because I have things that I think make a good book. So I looked at character, plot, place is a big thing for me with reading. Readability was another one, and I just judged as I went along with regard to that. I would say in this round, my two biggest factors were character and plot.
Okay.
I kept a vlog while I was reading, so I had my responses after I finished the book, and sometimes I would do a little check-in along the way. I'm so used to the Goodreads 5-star rating system. I've been using that for like a decade now. So basically, I rated along that scale, which I typically, for me, look at the topic and what the book is trying to say. That's really important for me. Is it trying to tell us something about the world or social justice or society or something like that? I also really look at the writing style and what the author is trying to do in terms of the narrative form and the structure and everything. Character as well is important for me, character development. And then honestly, this is the most subjective, just my personal reading experience. Like, did I have a good reading experience with the book? And then what I do is I look at all my star ratings at the end. If they all have different star ratings, it's really easy to rank them. If I have 2 that are 3 stars, then I have to figure out which one is kind of a stronger 3-star. For the books that I read months ago, because I have a BookTube channel, I go back and I look at how I wrapped up and talked about that book to remind myself how I thought about it. But yeah, that's how I did it.
Yeah, I think I went rather, for the first step, I went rather emotional or with the reading experience mainly. So if I had a terrible reading experience, this book wasn't going to be in the top ratings, even if later on I would be able to recognize character work or anything that I could actually appreciate. But none of the books that I was thinking, oh, I really don't want to be reading this, made it on the top spot. So obviously. We have a question for Sarah that I would have also asked in a similar way. Carolyn asks if she's curious if those you read 6 months ago ranked lower than the newer reads, or did that not make the difference?
No, it didn't. I don't think it made a difference. Actually, where I think I'm going to take that back. I think it might have made a difference because your feelings about a book change, of course, over time. And then sometimes there are things in a book that I really liked, and those are the things that I remember later. And so it could be that I feel more positively about that book than actually I did at the time that I read it. So interesting that you asked that question because I hadn't really thought about it, but I think it might have actually.
Okay. Yeah, I made this experience as well, that I read a book and then way later on, month or maybe even longer, I kind of changed my opinion on that one. That happened. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So in general, how do you deal with the reading for the BookTube Prize? Maybe I know some of you read a lot, others maybe reading not quite as much, and now you had to read 6 assigned books in 2 months. We have been calling it a school or feeling feeling back in high school experience a little bit. How was that for you, reading the books, and maybe did that influence your judging experience? Maybe you could.
So I had 2 books on my. Oh, sorry. Go on. Sorry, my bad.
No. You go on.
I had 2 books on my list that I'd already read prior to the list coming out. And one of them came out at the very end of the year, and I made a decision not to reread it because I spoke about it a lot. I read it in conjunction with a friend, and so I felt like it was pretty alive in my mind. And one of them I decided to reread because I'd read when it had a lot of hype, and I read it in the middle of that hype, and I was a little like unsure that it deserved the hype. And I was like, oh, well, how much of this had to do with my anticipation of the book as opposed to the book standing on its own? And so I made a decision to read that one again to try and see if I would have felt differently had I not read it in the midst of all the talk about it. And I think that I could say with the one that I reread, that was helpful because I just had a moment to step away from everything that I'd heard about it, and I hadn't read it in a while, and so it stood on its merits, and I don't think it did. I heard so much chatter about it when I read it.
Okay, Christy, I think you're breaking up a little bit.
It was Sarah that.
Yeah. Okay, I think maybe Christy is frozen there. Yeah, maybe we could go on with one of the others. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the reading experience was for you. 6 books.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, now we can hear you again, but I think your picture is still frozen.
Oh no.
Okay, well.
Nope.
No.
Maybe she'll come back.
Sure, Christy for the moment, but I'm sure she'll be able to log back on later. Okay, so maybe Debbie, how was it for you being back in high school, having to cope with
high school teacher, so my feathers are getting a little ruffled.
Actually, the nonfiction group was high school. This group was awesome. I really enjoyed all of the books that I read. They were all new books to me. They were all books that I probably would have never picked up on my own. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the BookTube prize. So I didn't have any difficulty with reading them at all.
So did you, all the books were new to you, but was there none of the books that you would have picked up on yourself?
I might have picked them up if I saw them on BookTube. Didn't tend to see this group of book on BookTube and being reviewed. One of them was a mystery murder book, which I like that kind of thing. I probably would have gravitated towards that naturally. One of them was a Booker Prize. I probably would have been intimidated to read it. So, but I enjoyed the books that I got. All except one.
See, I judged the same group as you, and I feel like we had quite a good mixture of books as well. I think that's what helped, is that they were very different in, you know, the story, but also the kind of tone of them as well. So that helped keep it sort of fresh as you were reading through the list, that each one was so different. It did make it a little bit harder to judge them though, because they were so different. But yeah, I think for me, that's certainly what helped, because they all sound really interesting. I wanted to pick them up, but I do try to kind of mix it up with like reading that I'm doing for myself as well. So I try and sort of alternate between a book that I'm reading to judge and then a book that I just want to read for, you know, my own personal enjoyment, because it just kind of breaks it up a little bit.
Yeah, I sort of have a similar strategy as Gemma. I don't like to be forced to read books. That automatically sort of gives me a little bit of a negative reaction. So So similar, I would intersperse with other things that I was interested in reading.
Same for me. I tried to do like half the books in the first month and then the other half in the second month. But I get them all from library ebook. So I have to play the library ebook game where I'm on hold for things. Like I already have books that are not in my round on hold in case I get them for my next round if they have like a 11 or 12 week waiting period, which would be too long once I get assigned them. So I'm already playing that game. But it was no problem. I would do the same thing. I just sort of bounce back and forth. And I read like 6 or 7 or 8 books at once anyways in my normal rotation of reading. That's the kind of reader that I am. So it's no problem for me to read those 6 books in 2 months.
Yeah, we have a comment about the way how you got your books, and you, Lindsay, were just mentioning that you were playing the library hold game, which I was actually also doing a little bit. I just started in the beginning of the year to finally use the library again, only for ebooks. But so I can feel you. I like put a hold on books like. Can it be it when I'm touching it, or yeah?
I'm really lucky. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm like right on the border of Multnomah County, which is the main county of Portland, but also Washington County, which is the suburban county. And I have access to both library systems. So on my Libby, I have both of them on there. So I have like double the amount of possibility of getting a book, which is really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
What I got all was all physical books, just because I like them for my library. But what I do is I get the Audible books too, and I'll do a combination of listening and reading. I like to do that. I feel it's very immersive when you do that. And then if I got busy, I still could continue reading the book Audible. So I did both.
I had a bit of a mixture. I think I had like a couple from the library. One, luckily, I already had, but I hadn't read it yet. And then the rest I did end up ordering just the physical copy of it, because I prefer to have the physical copy over like an ebook, same as you. But yeah, I had a bit of a mixture in how I obtained them.
Yeah, I play the library hold game as well. When the list of 48 books was sort of announced, I immediately went ahead and started placing holds. Again, just gambling that the ones that were in my group were going to come in. So that actually worked out for me really well. So I actually had a mix of physical books as well as audiobooks.
Yeah, I read, I think 3 of them I read as audiobooks, and luckily they all had narratives that I was fine with. I didn't think that it influenced my experience of the book, because they weren't like, there's some narratives where you think they actually have a very big influence over the text, that you get a very different impression maybe than just reading the book. And I didn't have that. I don't know what I would have done if I had gotten an audiobook with a narrator where I would either have not liked the narrator at all, so that I would maybe have a negative experience of the book, or a narrator that I would have thought that influenced the book in a way that I wasn't due for judging. Did any of you have this experience with audiobooks?
I think I have a hard time. I have to be really careful with Audible books. I don't think all books translate well to an Audible book. That's why I like having both. But I'm reading nonfiction now, and a lot of it does not translate good on an Audible book. So I like Audible books.
I have a hard time just with how my brain is wired to do audiobooks. The only time I do them is if I'm driving and I have to do them. It's the only way I can read. I struggle. I miss sections. I have to rewind a lot. It's really challenging for me to do audiobooks. So I am going to do one of my current round books in audio, but paired with the print text, because Robert had suggested that for this particular book. So I'm going to try that combination out and see. But typically I need to read with my eyes all the words in order for it to sink in.
I really like combining the two. I just find it so immersive.
I find audiobooks work well with books that are very plot heavy.
Maybe we could have a
I
look
agree.
at the second part of the question. If you are judging now, has that, and that refers to how you got your books in physical form, libraries, and especially or audiobooks. How has Corona changed that, or has it changed how you get your books now for the current round?
It did mean that obviously physical books from the library weren't an option, and I did have a look at like possible ebooks from my library, but I couldn't find any of the titles in there. I don't know whether like maybe their end there's a delay in getting some books in. I'm not entirely sure, but I did end up having to order physical books, but it did take quite a long time for them to arrive. Like I've got them now, but there was a moment where I wondered if it was going to be sort of pushing into the time that I needed to read them, but. Luckily, they did arrive. Yeah, I did have to sort of order them as soon as I got my like allocation, so that I could make sure.
I just watched your book haul this morning, Gemma.
How did you? Yeah, they're here.
Yeah, I have found that it seems like now that more people are doing ebooks, there's longer wait lists, and I'll check out a book, and then a day later it will say 5 people are waiting for that book. So I think there's more demand on the ebooks now that people can't go into the libraries.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I have the way that I registered with the libraries. I have an overdrive for a German library with English titles, and also registered for an international overdrive library account. And it's kind of fun because there's been 2 books that in the international account they had like a waiting list for 14 weeks or something, and I could get them easily in the German version, so that was interesting. But I also I thought like the waiting lists, I watched that from the beginning of the year, and they went up like rapidly in waiting time. Yeah,
I found Scribd. I could find books on Scribd that I couldn't find elsewhere. You know, because the lines were too long, and I did find a couple books on Scribd.
Yeah. Christy, we're having you back. That's great. Maybe you could.
It took a while, but I'm here.
Yeah, I saw you tried to log back on, but now you're back. That's great. Maybe you could just quickly tell us how you got your books for the first round. Did you use the library? Did you use ebooks, audiobooks, physical books?
So I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm just putting it out there now. So I use the library, ebooks and audiobooks. So I have lived in multiple counties that are right next to one another. God, I hope nobody from my county library is watching this, but anyway. And I have like access to a lot of libraries as a result, because I just haven't like when they're like, do you still live here? I'm like, well, sometimes I could get this book when I can't get it in the county I live in. And I work in the higher education system. And so I still have access to some higher education libraries. So I haven't had any problems, because either through my job, because I have university access, or through the multiple libraries that I have memberships for, I've been able to get the books. Plus, I'm an Audible subscriber, so.
Yeah, that's always a good way to get new books.
Yeah.
In audio form. I do that as well. Yeah, I use that. We have another question that I find interesting from the comments. And it asks, Liv, sorry for mispronouncing your name, probably. If you had been selected to judge another group for the first round, which one would you have preferred? I guess not counting if you have been content with your group or not.
I'd have to look at the list, but definitely not the one that had ducks.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the list, I think Group D looks pretty good. Did someone say that they judged that?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, that looks like a good group.
Yeah,
you probably have to wait because I gotta look.
Yeah. I actually thought Group A was probably the strongest group.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I really enjoyed that group.
Yeah, it was a good group, actually. Yeah.
I think it was a group with a lot of very popular titles that had been around for a while and had been already discussed for a while. So everybody would have kind of thought that this would have been like the popular group, maybe. And it didn't have ducks on it, so that's good.
Well, it had a lot of variety. It had a lot of variety in it. It had mystery, it had historical fiction, you know, it just had a lot to it.
I was kind of, I was thinking when I read my group for the first time, I had the feeling that it was a really good group for me because it had titles on it that I had been interested in but hadn't read yet. And it also had, I think there were 2 or 3 titles on it that I had never heard before. So I thought that was, for me personally, that was a perfect mixture. But I also looked to, I think Group A, maybe Group G, that I would have thought would have also been very interesting to judge. Yeah.
I really wanted Group H.
I was about to say that.
I really wanted Group H. I was like worried. There were 2 books on there that I really wanted to, I hadn't read, I wanted to read, and I wanted to be able to judge. And I don't think either of them made it through. I mean, that's for later in the conversation, but that was the other group. When I looked at it, I was just like, this one.
I was thinking that one looked good to me as well. And part of that is because I read The Old Drift last year and I absolutely loved it. And so I was excited to see that it made it to the Octafinals. It didn't go on to the quarterfinals, but I wanted to be in that group.
Can you say what books were in Group H? I don't know.
Yeah,
Are we allowed?
I can quickly read those. Group H was Olive Again, Normal People, City of Girls, The Night Tiger, The Old Drift, and Cantoras.
Oh, that would have been good.
Although it is interesting when you watched.
No, Robert.
When you watch people's wrap-up videos, they all seem to kind of say the same thing, that identifying the highest 2 books were really easy, the lowest 2 books were really easy, and the middle 2 books were hard. So it did seem like no matter what group you got, people sort of had the same judging experience in terms of how they ranked things.
Yeah.
Mine was sort of like that, but it was very clear top 3 and bottom 3 for me. And the top 3 that I picked actually moved on. So I felt affirmed. But the bottom 3 for me, I hated all 3 of them. So it was not good. The top 3 I liked well enough. I just wasn't sure in relation to each other where they fit.
I had a hard time between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
My 4 was like almost my 3, and my 3 could have been my 4, and that's where I had a hard time.
Yeah, my sort of middle ones were the most challenging ones for me as well. Actually, I had a sort of clear sort of favourite, and then ones that I didn't like as much. None that I really disliked, but yeah, I did find ranking the middle ones actually the hardest.
I had a similar experience to Lindsay. I had my top 3, I knew, but my bottom 3, I kind of shuffled multiple times, went back to my criterion again, but my top 3 and the way that they fell, 1, 2, 3 was pretty clear.
Yeah, I was thinking when I finally then put them in order to hand in my ballot, I was kind of thinking like the book that then ended on the number 3 spot, it kind of went down every time that I put the books in order, and I was, when I read it, I was sure that it would have been placed 1 or 2, but it didn't end up there, and yeah, but the last 2, they were easy.
My very first book, I think now I would rate number 2 instead of 1. I think that reading it last just had more impact, just because it was fresher in my mind. So my order would change a little bit now after a month.
So, okay, we have a little bit of background noise. I don't know where it's coming from.
I don't think it's me.
No. I think it's okay. We can deal with that. So I just had a question to you, and now I completely forgot my question. Well, let's talk a little bit about the books that you preferred from your groups. Did they make it? Did they are they now being judged by other judges, or did we lose some of them? How was that for you?
Well, my top 3 went forward.
Excuse me, could you
So-
repeat?
Pardon me?
Could you repeat what you just said? I think
Oh, my top 3 did go forward.
All
So
3
if
of
I
them.
had them to rank again, I think that one of my top 3 would not have gone forward. So
Yeah. Gemma, how was it with you?
Yeah, no, my top one went through, and I think I'm trying to remember now. I think 2 of my top 3 went through. I have a feeling one of them didn't, but certainly my favourite one did. So that was good for me.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
So Sarah, how was it for you?
Yeah, actually, my favorite 3 went through as well. I had Read at the Bone in my group, and I actually think that one has a strong chance of being the winner this year. I think it's a book that appeals to people who like more commercial fiction, but I think it's also appealed to people who are on the more literary end as well. So it's got sort of a crossover appeal. So I think that one has a chance of actually winning.
wow.
And now you predicted it.
Yeah.
Have you read her other,
first?
have you read her other one, Another Brooklyn?
No, I haven't.
It's a stronger book, I think, than Read at the Bone. But so you should read it. If you love Read at the Bone, you'll probably really love it. Although I don't know, maybe we'll be opposite. I liked Another Brooklyn more than Read at the Bone, but it wasn't in my judging group, so
yeah.
Well, we have a question regarding that. So, does any of you, we now know from Sarah, but does any of you feel that you already read the winner? That one of the top 3 will be the winner in the end?
I don't know yet. There's some out there still that I haven't read, that I'm intrigued by, that I think I could get into. And there was one in my group that I had like 0 interest in reading. I was just like, I don't want to read this, but okay, it's in my group, and it ended up being my #1 pick. So I don't know that I'm the best judge in that regard, because I was just like, oh, I like loved one of the books and it was literally like the last book I read because I didn't want to read it.
Yeah. Well, while I was reading the books, I was actually asking myself this question a little bit. Am I reading the winner right now? Is that the one that will make it in the end? And I didn't feel it. I think I read some very good books. I was, by 2 of them, I was really surprised that I liked them so much, and that I found so much value in them because I didn't expect it from those titles. But I don't think I read the winner. I don't think so. Lindsay, did you? Or,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I didn't read any 5-star books. They were all about 4-star, not all of them, but my last 3 were 4.5 stars. So I think there's another one out there that might, I hope, will be a little bit better, even though they were excellent.
Yeah, my #1 book, which was Women Talking by Marion Taves, is a 3.5-star book for me. That was the highest of the 5. I think it's a strong contender. I think depending on how readers take the writing style of it, but I think what it's trying to do is so important, especially for feminist literature. So I think that one maybe has the possibility of winning. But I think the way that, because it's the rank voting, and what I felt like happened last year is that the book that ended up winning last year, which was A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne, I think it was a book that everybody thought was strong, but I don't know that many people gave it #1. It just had so many like #2 and #3, so its numbers were so high. So I think, I mean, and that's kind of the beauty of the way that this prize works, is that it's trying to find a book that so many people can enjoy something from, and not find a Marmite book that like half the people really loved and half the people absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's just the nature of the way that the structure is set up for the prize. And I'm okay with that, because I'd rather there be a book that I really liked, but it wasn't my top win, than a book that I hated win.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I
Obviously.
read Girl, Woman, Other, and that's a Man Booker Prize, and I think that's going to give it a boost, just because it won the Man Booker Prize. So it'll be interesting to see how it's ranked by other people.
Yeah. So, Gemma, did you say if you felt like you
well,
read the winner?
My favourite one in my category was 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world by Elif Shafak. That was my favourite. But I do think it's a really good book, and I think it is really strong. A lot of people do seem to like it, but I'm not convinced it will necessarily be a contender for a winner. I'm not sure. Maybe. But I think looking at the other books that have gone through, I think there are some stronger ones in there that probably have more of a chance.
It was good, though.
It was, yeah, it really
That's
was.
the one I've been debating that I should have put first instead of Girl, Woman, Other.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So that was your second?
It was my second, but
Yeah.
but like I said, I think if I had read it last, it would have been my first choice.
Oh, interesting.
A month out, I remember that book. I don't remember Girl, Woman, Other.
Yeah, a lot of it stuck in my mind as well, and that was actually one of the ones that I read like before I was judging it. I had actually read it before. Yeah, I just remembered it so vividly. It is one of those ones that sticks in your mind.
Yeah, I would put it number one now in my group.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Maybe we can.
With Miriam Tao's as well, and I think I liked it more than you liked it, Lindsay.
Did you say that was your number one, Christy?
Yeah, that was my number one, and I put it as number one because it had this. I don't particularly like stream of conscious thought, like when I'm reading, but I was super engaged. And so I was like, and also like you, the topic is extremely relevant. I asked myself multiple times, I went back and forth on whether or not I would have preferred to have a female narrator, but then I thought, well, if you think about the community that is being illustrated, there wouldn't be a female narrator. And so I think I bumped it to 4 stars because I was like, for as authentic as it could be, it's authentic. But I don't know, like when I think, because I've read a lot of other books in other categories, and when I think about that category as a whole, in comparison to some of the other books that I didn't judge, but that I've read, I didn't feel like it was the winner, but I feel like it could win as well.
And I think that her narrative choice to have a male character just sit and practically be voiceless and only listen to the women was so intentionally powerful. And, I'm sort of stingy on star ratings. Like for real, for me, a 3-star book is a book I really like. I know some people have different ways that they do their star ratings. So 3.5 is still a really strong book for me. It's just not like an amazing book that I'm going to remember forever and recommend that everyone read.
Right.
So just if anyone's like, you only gave it 3.5 stars, doesn't that mean you didn't really like it? No, I'm really stingy with stars. I give maybe 3 5-star books a year. I mean, I just don't give 5 stars that often. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm trying not to go up too high. I have to hold myself back maybe sometimes a little bit, because in comparison to other books that I'm thinking that are really 5-star books, I don't want to rate books that high that I think they are great and I really enjoyed them, but they don't have this, like, what makes a 5-star book. So I'm trying not to be too flimsy with the stars, I guess, because I always when you go for the Goodreads star rating, they have this description like I liked it, I really liked it, and it was amazing. And so I kind of try to orient myself a little bit to that. It's completely different, like now with the prize ranking the books just in their groups, obviously, but of course I'm still having that like in the background, would this be a true 5-star read or would it not? So I think it's difficult, yeah. We have another question that maybe could get us a little bit in the authors or the books also. Did your first round got you interested in a specific author that you'd read more of now? I assume that you haven't read before, I guess. Did that happen for any of you?
So I did look up Miriam Tows after I read Women Talking. I thought her subject matter was interesting, and I then was subsequently interested in the fact that she came from a Mennonite background. And I have a book on hold, so yes.
I would read more books by, I don't know how to say her name, Aleph Shafak. Anyways, the author of 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world. I would enjoy reading her.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. I was just looking at the other books that I judged, and I'm not sure. I mean, one of them, at least, was a debut novel, and I think I would be interested in more of her books, and that was Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. I think I would be interested in seeing what else she writes in the future. But yeah, apart from, I pronounce it Elish Shafak. I don't know if that's right. I could be just completely mispronouncing that. But yeah, I'd have to agree. I think I would like to read more of her books, actually, because I was really impressed by the one that we read for this.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed Michael Crummey's The Innocents. And so I definitely got interested in reading some of his backlist. And he's a Canadian author. So I sort of got down a rabbit hole looking at other Canadian books. And that book was also nominated for the Giller Prize. So I sort of got down this rabbit hole of looking at other books that had been nominated for that prize this year as well as in the past.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I picked up all my Puny Sorrows from my school library because I live on campus. We have a boarding program. None of our kids are here. They all went back home where they actually live permanently. But I have a key to the library, and the librarian said I could go in there and get books when I want, which has been amazing. So I picked up all my Puny Sorrows to read that because I'm, piqued enough of my interest in the first book that I read. And actually, reading The Dutch House sort of changed my experience of reading Anne Patchett because I read Commonwealth and I thought it was not very well done. It was sort of a hot mess.
I love Commonwealth.
I thought it was a hot mess. And I was like, what is she trying to do in this dang book? So, and I really enjoyed the experience of reading The Dutch House. I found the writing much more contained and compelling, and I still am like, the message of it is like, didn't really teach me too much. So I'm going to read Bel Canto by her, I think, in June as a buddy read. So
that's the best.
Like, oh, good.
I'm of like two minds with Anne Patchett. When she hits it, she hits it, and when she doesn't, she doesn't. And like, in terms of like 5-star readings, Bel Canto is not a 5-star, but a big part of my do you make it past a certain point is longevity. And I think I read Bel Canto every 3 to 4 years.
Wow. That's great.
Like just structure alone, like she has a lot of balls in the air, and I feel like she catches them all at the end.
I have to say, I'm really bad about like blacklisting authors. If I don't like one book that I read by them, I'm like, oh, I hate that author. I don't want to read anything else. So I have to just be a little bit more open-minded about that and let my mind be changed and understand that every book has its own unique, identity. So the BookTube Prize is helping me do that because I can be really stubborn about authors that I don't like their first book I read by them.
One other thing I'll say in defense of Anne Patchett is there are some authors that I continuously go back to, and it's almost like when you listen to a musician, you're like, oh, I know that this is this musician, something about the melody or whatever. She's not like that. So I've never read a book by Anne Patchett where if somebody had said to me, someone else wrote this, I would look at it and be like, no, this is an Anne Patchett book. I wouldn't know. So like what's going on in The Dutch House versus what's going on in Commonwealth versus what's going on in Bel Canto, they're almost like, it's almost a different author, except for the one thing that I will say about Commonwealth and the Bel Canto is she has a big cast. in the way that she doesn't necessarily in the Dutch house.
Yeah.
So
Just quickly putting Robert's comment on. I also I heard that he said this in one of his videos that Max Porter's first book really didn't do it for him, and then he loved the current one. So I also have this have had this experience with authors before. It didn't happen right now, but my author that I definitely am looking into reading more is Deborah Levy, The Man Who Saw Everything. I enjoyed that book. I thought it was kind of strange, but that's also what I enjoyed as a reading experience, and so I'm definitely looking up more of her books, and also already put on a hold on one of hers from the library. So yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the books that didn't make it, that were cut from the field in the first round, because I think personally there were a lot of books lost that have big names or had a lot of talk about on BookTube, but also on maybe some of the prize lists or stuff like that. So what were surprises to you? It doesn't have to be from your group, that's fine, but over the whole field, what surprised you? Which books surprised you that didn't make the cut?
I was quite surprised that Normal People by Sally Rooney didn't make it through, actually. I mean, it wasn't a book that I absolutely loved. I thought it was good. I didn't think it necessarily lived up to the hype. So I don't know whether like other people who were judging it felt the same way, but it just felt like one of those books that was so hyped and people just seemed to really, really love it last year. And it was everywhere and people were like buzzing about it. So I was actually very interested to see that it didn't make it through, because I just thought it was going to be one of those ones that was a given, that it was just going to go straight through.
Yeah. I was betting on that one too. I haven't read it, but just from the buzz that it got, I thought it would make it, but didn't.
Yeah.
I just recently read Miracle Creek by Angie Kim, and I was surprised that didn't make it through. And I figured The Old Drift would not make it through because it's such a weird, quirky, crazy, wackadoo book that I know is not going to be for everyone. But I loved it, so I was sad that it didn't make it.
I want to read it based on what you said about it. I think it sounds amazing.
It's a reading experience.
Can't wait.
That's part of why we are talking about the books right now, because I'm sure there's some books that didn't make it that you think the others should read. So I was kind of was sad and a little bit surprised that in Group H, Cantoras didn't make it. I read this a while ago and I enjoyed it. And I think I thought it was a book that had like lots of elements that would make it pass. And I was kind of surprised that it didn't make it. Did any of you read that?
I have. I was okay with it.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm not representative here, so
no, maybe I'm not. I was surprised Dominicana didn't make it through, actually. Yeah. That's a book that I think people have generally really liked, and obviously it was just shortlisted for the Women's Prize, so that was one I was surprised to not see go through.
Is that a YA book?
No, no.
I have heard that it's YA, and I sort of run the opposite direction away from YA. So
I do too, actually.
I'm avoiding it because I just have this weird impression of it. But do you recommend it? Should I add it to my list?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's a bit of a it's an immigrant story. It takes place in the late 60s in New York City. So in some ways, it's a really a love story about New York City and its sort of ever-changing neighborhoods. So I thought there was a lot of things in there to that book. Yeah, I think it's worth reading for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. And I was judging the group where it was in, and there were two books that were like those immigrant stories, Patsy and Dominicana. I rated Dominicana higher because my reading experience of it was better. Not judging the immigrant experience, obviously, but I thought that from my reading, the kind of the style that she chose for the book, there's a first-person narrator, for example, opposite to Patsy, where there's a third-person narrator and stuff like that. And I thought that was actually, for me, achieving more of what I was expecting from a story like that, maybe. So I would definitely recommend it.
I'm reading Patsy right now, but not for the prize, just because I love Nicole Dennis Benn's first book, Here Comes the Sun. So I wanted to check out this one.
So what else?
I was surprised. I wanted to see, maybe I don't want to say I was surprised, but I wanted to see an orchestra of minorities go through. It's not for everybody. That was one I started and was like, and I didn't read it as a part of the prize, but I was just like, oh, I'm not ready for this. Like, sometimes you read a book and you know, I'm not going to give it what it deserves. And so I picked it up about a month later and really thought that it had merit. And I thought what it was trying to say was something that I would have liked to go through. But at the same time, I could see how if you're not specifically geared toward reading a book where the mystical and mythological, like a ghost, is very present in the book, like that could be ostracizing for a certain type reader. But I did want it to go through.
I feel like I have to.
The Lost Children's Archive didn't go through because there was a buzz about it too. There was like so much conversation around it.
Okay, so I'm looking at the list, and there are some like big or biggish names that we also just voted off the prize. For example, I was surprised that Spring by Ali Smith didn't make it. I can say this, I'm not a big fan of Ali Smith. I'm having problems with her style usually, but I know so many booktubers are like really into her, and I heard a lot of good things about her books, and so I was kind of like, how did she not make it? How did that book not go on into the quarterfinals? Any of you read it?
I haven't read Spring. I tried reading Autumn and Winter from her seasonal quartet. I think she's one of those writers, I think, a bit of an acquired taste. She's got a very sort of unique and distinct writing style. I think you're either on board with or you're not. So whether it is one of those situations where people who are judging that category just didn't get on with her style at all, but I know a lot of people do really love her. I didn't find her writing for me like at all. But I can understand why other people might like it if it is to your taste. So maybe it's something like that.
I'm not a big Ali Smith fan, so I was relieved that I didn't have to read it. And I feel of like she's not for me. I read Autumn. I DNF'd Winter, and she's one of those writers where in terms of what's topical and what's important to write about, she's writing about it. But in terms of what's palatable for me, it's hard for me to stay with a very relevant topic through that medium. And so I'm just not the reader for her.
Yeah, I've never had a desire to read any Ali Smith. And from my understanding, she writes a lot about current British politics, which I have a really hard time with books that write about politics that are not in a country where I live. I just don't get it. It just flies over my head. I don't understand any of the references. If it's historical fiction and it's setting up the backstory and helping us understand a time period in history, yes, but current politics in a country that I don't live in, it's hard for me as a reader to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I didn't even understand what was going on, and she's writing about my country. I got understand.
I was actually thinking that might be one of the reasons. Yeah.
You're giving me more and more reasons to never pick her book up.
Sorry, Alice.
Totally.
Okay.
I am. She's the kind of writer I just because this is subjective. I put into this category in my mind that I call like erudite writing. And I actually subscribe to the belief that you shouldn't make it easy for the reader. Like I don't feel like a reader shouldn't have to work, but there are some books where when I read them, I'm like, okay, if I wanted to read work that I felt like I would use for a thesis, I would be in a PhD program. And she falls more within that category. Like sometimes when I read Ali Smith, I'm like, oh, this would be a good topic to write a 30-page paper on to turn into some literary class. And so in that regard, I'm like, oh yes, it's very much literary, but that level of erudition is it's not what I'm here for.
Yeah, for me, there's a big difference between allowing your readers the chance to think critically and make connections and not like beat them over the head with your message and your themes, and almost purposely trying to write in a cryptic way. I think of someone like James Joyce. Reading this book is not making me smarter, nor is it making you smarter because you wrote a book that's hard to understand. I just can't get on board with that kind of thing either. So I agree with you, Christy.
I describe those books as medicine, that you're reading them because they're supposed to be good for you, but you don't really enjoy it.
You got to go with James Joyce. You got to go with the short stories.
Yeah, I don't mind the short stories. They're okay. But I mean, I think someone like Virginia Woolf, I think just does modernism so much better. And maybe it's because she's got all these, themes that have to do with being a woman and all that kind of stuff that I can relate to. But yeah, James Joyce, I just can't do it.
Okay. Any of the books that you want to recommend that didn't make the cut that we haven't talked about yet, that you need people to read because they are good, even though they didn't move on?
I liked Your House Will Pay by Steph Cha. I almost made that my third place book. I debated between The Beekeeper of Aleppo and Your House Will Pay. And the only reason I judged them like I did was that because the Beekeeper of Aleppo was more of an immigrant story. I felt it was more in the forefront right now than Your House Will Pay, but they were both excellent.
I'm going to read that, Debbie, for the Asian Readathon. I'm going to read that one for the Asian Readathon next month.
Oh, it's good. Did you like it, Gemma? I did.
That was my second choice, actually. That was my number 2 in my rankings. I thought it was really, really good. And it was a book I hadn't heard of before I got the allocation. I'd never heard of it. But that's what I love about judging this prize, because it makes you read books that you wouldn't have otherwise picked up. But I thought it was fantastic.
I did too. I really enjoyed it.
I would recommend.
Oh, go ahead, Chrissy.
No, I'm just saying I'm on board with that. There's something to be said about that the focus, the intersection between the two families in Your House Will Pay that I don't know is regularly voiced in literature, and then it was just really well wrought. So I think that that's what I would recommend in terms of people reading.
I was going to defend A Fleischman in Trouble. That's a book that I think has been sort of critically lauded, and I feel like it's really gotten trashed on BookTube.
Could you repeat the title? I didn't quite get the title.
Fleischman is in Trouble. And I mean, I think the book has some problems as a book, And I know, again, I think it's been trashed on BookTube, and I think it's been trashed a little bit unfairly. So I guess I would say maybe give it a try, and don't rely on all the BookTube channels that you've been watching as an indication of whether or not you should read the book.
Yeah. I have if I would make people read a book, I would always be thinking about Disappearing Earth that also didn't make it, and I didn't know what to expect when I went into reading it, and then I had like a really great reading experience, and I like with each chapter I felt like I got more and I got more, so I like that about the book, that you get to see so many different aspects, and it wasn't like the best book ever, but I remember that being really, really touched by the way that it was told and stuff like that, and so I can only recommend that. Disappearing Earth was a great reading experience for me.
I agree.
I'd recommend Pantoras. You brought it up earlier, Carly. That I enjoyed that. I thought that was a very solid book, and the subject matter isn't something that I would have picked up myself. I read it as a read along, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it had some really good elements. So that's another one that didn't make it through that I would recommend.
Definitely. Well, we have a question from Robert. So, of the books still in the competition, so I guess we are allowed for a little bit to talk about those. Which do you think is overhyped? Any thoughts on that?
I have a controversial one. I feel Parkland is overhyped. Are we allowed to mention books? Yeah, I feel that one's very overhyped.
There's one I'm currently reading, but I don't want to say because it'll give away my impression of it. So I'm going to zip my mouth until May 31st.
Oh, I guess I should have done that.
Well, I don't actually know.
Oh, I know. I think
I'm feeling very... Excuse me?
The Nickel Boys. Overhyped.
Did you read it?
Yes, not for the BookTube Prize, just for my own reading. And I think because Colson Whitehead wrote it, people love it, but I think that's one of the only reasons. And the subject matter of it is really fascinating, and to go down the kind of rabbit hole of learning the history, because it's based on a true story, is definitely worth it. But the way the book was told, I think it's not a very well crafted book. But I think I'm in the minority with that.
I'm having a hard time with that question because I don't think I can be talking about books that I haven't read. And if I just go from the hype that I experience over BookTube and other media, I would probably say Ducks, but I can't. I don't feel like I'm allowed to judge because I haven't read it, and everything that I heard about it kind of makes it sound a bit like, well, yeah, Jane's Joyce to me, like interesting if you're doing a literary study, but as a reading experience, at the moment I can't imagine that the experience would be good. But
so
yeah,
I have one. I think Queenie is totally overhyped for me. So reductive, in my opinion. I have very strong feelings about Queenie, which I will not voice here, but I do think that it was overhyped. And in terms of nuance, I found it lacking.
Any more thoughts on that? Oh no. Okay. Well, I I think we talked about a lot of the books. I'm very happy that we did. I would ask each of you to share one of the books that you're currently reading, not necessarily for the prize, because probably you're not allowed to talk about that. But maybe just share one of the books that you are currently reading and how's that going for you. Debbie, would you like to start?
Well, I have expressed that I'm reading a lot of social justice, so I decided to pick it up with the book The Body by Bill Bryson, because it's much lighter. He's an author I enjoy, and he's funny. I felt like I needed something that was just a little bit more entertaining, that I didn't have to focus on too much. So that's what I'm reading right now.
I've got 2 books on the go at the moment. I'm listening to The Road Home by Rose Tremaine on audio, and then I'm reading The Switch by Beth O'Leary, who is the writer of Flatshare that came out last year. And The Switch is her new book this year, so I'm reading that one.
Great. Chrissy, what are you reading at the moment?
So I'm currently reading We Ride on Sticks by Quan Barry. I like literally just started it last night. I don't have too much to say about it, but I kind of got into it. Like if you're not YA affiliated, this might not be for you, but I got into it for some levity. So it's about a girls field hockey team. But I'm interested in female. I'm reading a lot about female relationships, and I'm interested in that intensity that develops in like young teen female relationships and what that looks like comparatively. It's just something that I'm looking at from book to book. So I started that just to be like, how does this play out? And my plan is to read a book about older women and a friendship, to see what I think is the difference in how something with young characters is wrought versus women in their like 30s or 40s, and what that looks like.
Cool. Lindsay, one of the 7 books you're currently reading.
I think I'm reading 9 books right now.
Okay, sure.
Well, I want to just quick mention 2 of them. The first is a book I just finished yesterday, which is The Kingdom of Copper, which is the second in S.A. Chakraborty's The David Trilogy. I am not a fantasy reader at all, and this is an incredible trilogy. She calls it Muslim fantasy. It's just a beautiful series. The 3rd one comes out in June. So I recommend that one. And then one book I'm currently reading that's been kind of a cool reading experience that I wasn't sure going in is The Travelers by Regina Porter. I'm actually really enjoying that one. And I think that one's kind of a hit or miss for people, but I think it's very unique. There are pictures in it, and there's all this stuff about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. And it's just a really thought-provoking book that's making my brain work, which I appreciate. But the writing is sort of easy enough to read that I can read for 30 minutes or so at a time with it before I want to switch to another book. So
I am currently reading Sea People, which is one of the nonfiction octafinal books, or quarterfinal books. I'm usually not a big nonfiction reader, but for some reason, nonfiction seems to be working for me while I'm stuck at home. And I'm also reading The Mercies by, I think it's Karen Millwood Hargreaves, I want to say. I'm a sucker for historical fiction, so it's just it's very atmospheric. It's very sort of evocative of, place, which is always a winner for me. It's a kind of a recent book, so it takes place in the north of Norway, in the 1700s, I believe. So the village, it starts out with basically all the men in this village are sort of killed in a whaling accident. And so it's sort of what happens to the village when sort of the women are sort of left to themselves.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait, what's the name of the book again?
The Mercies.
I'm going to look
Mercy.
that up.
Totally. Yeah.
I could chime in because I started this a couple of days ago, so that was the one that I was going to mention.
Okay, would you agree?
Yeah, I haven't read. I just started it really, but I think it's going to be great. I think the topic is really interesting, and what I've read from the writing so far, I really enjoyed. And yeah, it's historical fiction, which is always something that I am really enjoying, and I think it feels like it's put together really well. So like a actually pretty artful, I think. But I've just started it. But
Yeah.
from so far, I would recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm reading an Italian book that I don't even know if it's translated to English. It's translated to German. It was a big seller here. It's by Francesca Melandri. And the title is basically called Everyone But Me. And I think it's a really interesting read. I have no clue if it's available internationally, but it's about 3 generations of an Italian family and Italian colonial history in Ethiopia. And that's the kind of the first or the oldest time frame that's put there. And then in the well, yeah, I think it's 2015 when the book is set in the now time, and that's about it brings in the immigrant experience or stuff like that, and it's really interesting. So I have no clue if that's internationally available, but if you read Italian or German. Definitely interesting. I think it's a big seller, so I guess it should be translated at one point. Yeah.
The only other thing I will say that I've been reading is short stories. I've been kind of like, well, actually, I've always loved short stories, but long novels haven't been working for me in the same way. Like I need to take a break, and I find that I don't know if it's the ambiguity of short stories or whatever, but I just recently fell into a hole. Lisa Tadeo, I think that's how you pronounce it. I know everybody's talking about 3 women, but I just like recently found this cache of her short stories online. And I am like, there's something to be said about the way that she talks about I don't know if it's because I'm in my 30s now, but like middle-aged women and the internal goings on of middle-aged women imploding, I'm like here for it. And I'm like, and so like if anybody wants to, like, she has a lot of stuff, you could just like look her up, and then like I haven't bought anything. I just like have clicked online and been able to access her short stories, and it's working for me.
Yeah, it sounds like a great tip. Well, thank you. Okay, I think we're done for this talks edition. I thank all of you for sharing your experience with us. I enjoyed this a lot. Also, thank you to everybody in the comments who were writing along and discussing the books that we mentioned as well. So I hope you have a good time judging the second round. I know that I have. I'm right in the middle of it already. Thank you. I hope we can repeat this experience for another time. And for today, bye-bye.
Nice to meet everyone.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Thank you.